People know you, of course, from your Queen Bee series, I guess we should say, both
the Queen Bee series, yes.
The adolescents and their mothers and fathers. But now you've written a novel called Boys, Girls, and Other Hazardous Materials.
Yes, thanks for getting the title.
Yes, well, tell us a little bit about why you've fallen in love with the foibles of adolescent life.
Well, I always, I taught for a really long time to kids from the ages of about 4th grade through 12th grade with a curricula about social leadership, media literacy, and ethical leadership. And as I was doing this, I'm a teacher. Now I just have a much bigger classroom. And I was really fascinated always by how girls and boys were interacting with each other and how that would make them do things in really important moments of like when they would speak out if they wouldn't like something that they were seeing. And for me, the novel, trying to do a young adult novel, was a different way for me to be able to reach teenagers, because lots of people read, and lots of kids read Queen Bees and Wannabes, even though I had no intention of that happening. Never thought kids would read a how-to book for parents, never, but a lot of them do. But I wanted to be able to do it in a way that didn't really feel like I was beating them over the head and being all lectury and boring, but to be able to do a story that really reflected all of the things that kids had told me about and put it into some kind of story that kids could relate to.
And you say that this is sort of a somewhat of a departure, but at the same time,
no, it's not really.
the original book was already turned into sort of a fictionalized version, of course, in the film Mean Girls that you had a part in, but since the books have come out, it seems like the media has actually sort of fed even more of these Mean Girls stereotypes and actually almost celebrated it.
Yeah, it's really complicated because media does do a lot of that. And of course it doesn't hurt, and it helps the media in that way, where you've got constant feeding of these videos of kids being incredibly mean to each other that we can all have recorded all the time, with all different kinds of things, from cell phones and computers and Facebook and all of that. But what's really important to me is that even in light of all of that, what you're just talking about, which is true, is that lots of times what we get to is that parents feel that they don't matter, that they can't fight against all of the stuff that's all around them. And the kids can't do anything about it. But really it's important, it's the reason I'm here in Utah, is really to be able to talk with parents about you actually do matter, and you matter a lot, and the kids really, really want to hear you. And so one of the sponsor for the book tour that we're doing is Dove Go Fresh, and they did this big survey. And one of the things that we found out from that is that 7 out of 10 kids, 70% of kids want their parents to talk to them about things that they're confused about and problems that they're having. And I think it's really important to remind parents that you actually matter, and your kids are listening to you. So don't think that they're not listening to you. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here today, is to be able to sort of help remind people that, because we see all this stuff in the media that makes us feel like, oh, this is just too crazy. All of these mean girls are everywhere, and it's feeding into it, just like you're saying.
And beyond that, how are parents supposed to talk to their kids about this? Because I'm guessing this is probably, this is something almost every parent has experienced at some point or another, whether being the abused or the abuser.
Definitely. Or watching it, or sure.
And so how do you get that dialogue started?
Well, I think the most important thing is that it's important for parents to realize that their kids could be, as you're saying, it's messy. So you can have a kid who's, who can perpetrate like really mean stuff, but then also be targeted. They can, be a perpetrator in school, a queen bee at school, but they can be a wannabe or a pleaser at home in their neighborhood. So these things are fluid for the most part. And the other thing I would say to parents is, your kid comes to you and says, like, Mom, Dad, I'm having a really hard time with something. Unfortunately, the really common response that parents give is something like, just ignore it, just walk away, show them that you're the better person, those kinds of things. And frankly, even though they come from a good place, they really are pretty ineffective, because your kid does not wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm just gonna go talk to my mom, right? It's something they've been thinking about for a really long time. So they finally come to you and then you say, oh, just ignore it. Well, they can ignore it. And the other part is, with social networking, there is no way to ignore it. The problems follow you wherever you go. So what I say to parents is, instead of doing that, when your kid comes to you, you say, I'm really sorry this happened to you. Thank you for coming and telling me, because it's a huge leap that your kid's coming to you and asking for help. And together we're going to work on this. We're going to think through this problem so that you can get a handle on it better.
And for a lot of parents, they start seeing these problems start to crop up in the tween years and teen years. But really, the foundation for this has to come much earlier,
yes,
because you can't just wait until your kid is a junior in high school to start talking to them.
That's what's so funny about it. Right? No, it's not like all of a sudden kids become mean. Really by the age of 4 and 5, kids can be very, very mean to each other. And what's important for parents to realize is not to be horrified by this, right? Like, oh my gosh, what kind of kids are coming up today in today's world. It's that kids can be, and they always have been, able to be mean. And so what you do with it is where a parent really steps in and is effective or is not effective. And what's important about that is to be able to say, well, look, we've got to age appropriately address where kids are. So, another thing about why I'm here is that I'm not just doing this with teenagers. The Girl World Tour and this campaign is about working with kids who are tweens, who are 8 and 9 and 10 years old. And that age is really, for a lot of different reasons, are really why, and really when we see some conflicts really start to bump up and parents start to get really anxious. And so one of the things I'm here to do is to be able to say, we don't have to be so anxious. We can actually give you tools to help your daughter, or help the important girl in your life be more confident.
When you do these events and you're traveling around the country, what sort of responses are you getting? What sort of questions are you getting? Similar questions everywhere from Nebraska to Manhattan.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's actually a wonderful thing, because it means that we all are sort of in this together, right? I mean, we're all facing similar challenges. I mean, we have really common experiences. And I hope people feel like it's not, like, oh, everybody's the same. It's that we all have experiences, and we all, and that the experiences are important. So yes, there are things that I do get. I mean, for example, parents will ask me, well, what do I do when my child is, bystanding to this? Or what happens if they're a friend, they have a friend who's a bad seed and I don't like their influence? What happens if I have a kid who, someone's been really, really mean to them and they talk about it with me, but then the next day they're best friends again? What's that about? I mean, I think it's also important for parents to realize how much these issues are impacting kids, because the other thing on the survey that we did showed that like 70% of girls are coming to school really worried about what the gossip is that's going on in school. And when you are really, really worried about that kind of stuff, you cannot focus on your schoolwork. Parents will sometimes say, well, just study, just focus on your schoolwork. You can't do it. Because, and also with, 85, 90% of kids with cell phones, and they're bringing them to school, all of this stuff is just interwoven into every aspect of our lives. So there really is no way to escape. So parents really need to be able to have skills that are concrete, that are not like crazy freak out, responses, but are really focused on teaching their children social competence so their children can feel better about themselves. And that's really what we're here to do.
Now, some people may not be able to make it to the event tonight, but you do have a number of resources on your website.
Yes, there's two ones that I would direct parents to. One is don'tfretthesweat.com, which is when you can get all of this information about the tour and about all different kinds of information along the lines that we've been talking about today. And then you can also go to rosalindwiseman.com, and I've got vlogs and all different kinds of articles, and kids asking me questions and I respond, and parents ask me questions and I respond by video. And you can get other information about where the Girl World Tour will go next. So it's not, even if you don't come tonight, I hope people do, but even if they don't, and it's a lot of fun. It is by far the most fun I have ever done on any book tour. Absolutely, it's totally fun, I have to tell you. But even if you can't do it, there's lots of resources on both of those websites, on Don't Fret the Sweat and rosalindwiseman.com, that you can get lots of things that you need.
Fantastic. Rosalind Wiseman, thank you so much for taking the time.